Anzio, Italy. February 1944. A German officer crouches in his foxhole, writing frantically in his diary by candlelight. His hands shake, not from cold, but from exhaustion and fear. The entry reads, "American paratroopers, devils in baggy pants, are less than 100 meters from my position. I cannot sleep at night. They appear from nowhere, and never know when or how they will strike. It seems the black-hearted devils are everywhere. Here's the irony that would haunt military historians for decades. The German officer was complaining about American pants being baggy. But if you have seen any World War II footage, you know it was the Germans who wore those distinctive ballooning pants, the ones that looked like riding breeches, the ones Hollywood villains still wear today when they want to look menacing and authoritarian. So what's the truth? Why did Germans wear such baggy pants? And why did it confuse everyone, including the Germans themselves? The answer involves an Indian prince who couldn't speak English very well, a misunderstanding in a London tailor shop, a 200-year-old cavalry tradition based on death imagery, and one of the most ironic fashion mix-ups in military history. By the end of this story, you'll understand why German fashion symbolism ended up making them perfect targets, why the most practical uniform they designed was copied by their enemies, and why American soldiers ended up being called the baggy pants devils, not the Germans. This is the story of how aristocratic tradition, industrial pragmatism, and a geographic misunderstanding combined to create one of World War II's most distinctive and misunderstood symbols. London, England, 1897. Savile Row. Prince Pratap Singh of Jodhpur walks into the most prestigious tailor shop in the British Empire. He's in London for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, wearing his distinctive Indian riding pants. These pants are unusual to British eyes, tight from the knee down but ballooning dramatically at the thighs. They're designed for polo players in the scorching heat of India, allowing freedom of movement while riding but staying secure in the stirrups. The tailor, fascinated by this exotic garment, asks a simple question. "What do you call these?" The prince, his English limited, misunderstands. He thinks the tailor is asking where he's from, not what the pants are called. He replies, "Jodhpur." The tailor writes it down in his order book. And just like that, a geographic misunderstanding becomes the name for a style of pants that would define military authority for the next 50 years, including in the German Wehrmacht. But here's what that Savile Row tailor couldn't have known. These pants, designed for Indian polo players in scorching heat, would end up on German officers freezing in Russian winters. They would become symbols of Nazi authority, so powerful that Hollywood would use them to portray villains for the next 80 years. And they would start as nothing more than a communication failure between a prince and a tailor. The Jodhpur style spread quickly through British society. By the early 1900s, they had become the standard riding pant for the British cavalry and polo players throughout the empire. But the pants carried something beyond mere function. They carried class. To understand why Germans adopted baggy pants so enthusiastically, we need to go back even further. Back to the French Revolution in 1789. During the French Revolution, aristocrats wore culottes, short puffy pants that ended at the knee, worn with silk stockings. The working class wore long trousers, practical pants that covered the entire leg. When the revolution erupted, the working class revolutionaries proudly called themselves sans culottes, without culottes. It was a political statement. We don't wear your aristocratic fashion. We wear working man's clothes. For decades after, the type of pants you wore signaled your class allegiance. Short and puffy meant aristocracy. Long and straight meant working class. By the early 1900s, the equation had evolved, but the symbolism remained. Ballooning pants, now in the form of jodhpurs, meant officer class, cavalry tradition, aristocratic background. Straight pants meant enlisted men, infantry, common soldiers. The German Empire, obsessed with military tradition and aristocratic hierarchy, embraced this system completely. By World War I, German cavalry officers wore jodhpurs as a mark of status. It signaled, "I come from the riding class. I come from the nobility. I command." When the Wehrmacht was formed in 1935, they inherited this tradition. But they didn't just maintain it. They expanded it into an entire symbolic language of pants. Not one type, not two, but four completely different styles of baggy or distinctive pants, each with its own origin story, its own practical purpose, and its own fatal flaw. Let's examine each type and understand why German military fashion became both their symbol of authority and, eventually, their downfall. Type 1. Officer jodhpurs. The symbol of power. Picture a German officer in 1940. Black leather jack boots rising to his knees, polished to a mirror shine. Pants that balloon dramatically at the thighs, then taper perfectly into those boots. A belt with an eagle and swastika buckle. The whole ensemble designed to project authority, tradition, and aristocratic military heritage. This wasn't practical. This was theater. Major General Erwin Rommel, who would become famous as the Desert Fox, wore jodhpurs throughout his career, even in North Africa, where they made absolutely no sense. The ballooning thighs trapped heat. The tight fit below the knee restricted blood flow in the desert sun. The black leather boots absorbed heat like solar panels. So why did he wear them? Why did thousands of German officers insist on jodhpurs, even when they were uncomfortable and impractical? Because in the German military hierarchy, jodhpurs signaled everything. They said, "I come from cavalry. I come from aristocracy. I went to officer school. I command." The association between jodhpurs and authority was so powerful that it transcended the military. Hollywood directors in the 1920s and 1930s adopted jodhpurs as their standard costume on film sets. Cecil B. DeMille, the legendary director, wore jodhpurs while directing. So did many others. The message was universal. Jodhpur pants equal authority. The man giving orders wears the baggy riding pants. But here's the irony that German officers didn't consider when they dressed each morning. Those distinctive silhouettes made them perfect targets. Soviet snipers on the Eastern Front were trained specifically to identify officers by their uniforms. The training was explicit. See the jodhpurs, see the tall boots, that's an officer. Kill him first. Decapitate the command structure. One Soviet sniper, Vasily Zaitsev, who would become legendary at Stalingrad, described his targeting priority in post-war interviews. The officers always stood out. They dressed like they were on parade, even in combat. The baggy pants, the tall boots, the binoculars around their necks. They might as well have painted targets on their chests. The very symbol meant to project authority and command respect became a liability. The fashion choice that said, "I am in charge," also said, "Shoot me first." And the technical design of these pants reveals even more about German priorities. The jodhpurs weren't actually baggy in the way we think of baggy. They were engineered with precise tailoring. From the knee down, they were cut to exact measurements, typically with only 2 centimeters of ease, designed to fit smoothly inside the tall jackboots without bunching or wrinkling. At the thighs and hips, they ballooned out, typically to a circumference of 45 centimeters or more, to allow mounting and riding horses. Every pair was custom-fitted or carefully sized. The German military maintained detailed sizing charts with dozens of measurements. This wasn't off-the-rack clothing. This was bespoke military fashion. But here's what makes it absurd. By World War II, most Wehrmacht officers never rode horses in combat. They rode in staff cars, in half-tracks, in trucks. The pants were designed for a method of warfare that had ended in World War I. Yet the tradition persisted because tradition mattered more than practicality. The jodhpur represented everything about the German officer class, obsessed with heritage and symbolism, committed to aristocratic ideals. willing to be impractical if it meant maintaining tradition. And as the war progressed, this commitment to aristocratic fashion would cost German officers their lives, one sniper shot at a time. Type 2. Panzer Black, the practical solution. Now imagine a completely different scenario. You're a German tank crewman in 1940. You're climbing into a Panzer III or Panzer IV, a steel coffin filled with oil, grease, hot machinery, and approximately zero room to move. The interior is cramped. You're constantly brushing against oily surfaces. The engine, separated from the crew compartment by only a thin metal plate, radiates heat that makes the whole space feel like an oven. And you're expected to maintain this machine, fight in it, and somehow stay looking like a proper German soldier. Your uniform? All black. Pants tucked into ankle boots with drawstrings to keep them secure. This is the only German uniform designed with actual function taking priority over form. Hans Müller, a Panzer crewman with the 7th Panzer Division, remembered his first day in tank training in his post-war memoir. The instructor looked at us, fresh recruits in our clean field, gray uniforms, and laughed. He said, "By tonight, you'll look like coal miners. By next week, your mothers won't recognize you. By the end of training, your uniforms will be black anyway from all the oil and grease. So we skip the middle step. Welcome to the Panzerwaffe." The black Panzer uniform was introduced in 1934, technically violating the Treaty of Versailles, which severely limited German military development. Germany was forbidden from having tanks at all, let alone special uniforms for tank crews. But the Nazi government found a loophole. They classified the black uniform as work clothing, not military uniforms. Technically, these were mechanics' overalls. The fact that they came with military insignia, were issued through military channels, and were worn exclusively by tank crews was conveniently overlooked. The genius of the design was purely practical. Black fabric hides oil stains, grease marks, and general filth better than any other color. This was essential for crews who worked constantly with machinery. A field gray uniform would show every oil spot, every hydraulic fluid stain, every mark from working inside a cramped metal box. Black made those stains invisible. The short jacket design was equally practical. Inside a tank, there's almost no standing room. You're constantly climbing over equipment, squeezing through hatches, working in positions where a long coat would catch on every protruding lever and handle. The short jacket, ending at the waist, prevented snagging on internal machinery. The pants had drawstrings at the ankles, allowing crews to cinch them tight inside their ankle boots. This prevented loose fabric from catching in the gears, levers, and mechanical components that filled every cubic inch of a tank's interior. But the black uniform carried symbolism beyond its practical function. The design was based on the Death's Head Hussars, the Totenkopf Husaren, of August von Mackensen from World War I. That skull insignia, the Totenkopf, that looks so sinister on panzer uniforms. It came from Prussian Hussar regiments of the 1700s. For over 200 years, elite Prussian cavalry units had worn the Death's Head symbol. It represented their fearlessness in battle, their elite status, their willingness to face death. When tank crews inherited the symbol, it created a deliberate connection. You are the new cavalry. You are the armored elite. You carry forward 200 years of German military tradition. The black uniform turned mechanized warfare into a continuation of cavalry heritage. Tank crews weren't just mechanics operating machines. They were the spiritual successors to the elite horsemen of Frederick the Great's army. But here's where it gets ironic. The British Army, observing German tank crews in North Africa and Europe, decided the black uniform was brilliant. They created a nearly identical uniform for their own tank crews. Black coveralls, short jacket, similar design. They had to discontinue it in 1940. British troops kept shooting at their own tank crews because they looked exactly like Germans. The most practical German uniform design was so practical that the enemy copied it. then had to uncopy it because it worked too well. The technical details of the Panzer uniform revealed German thoroughness even in work clothing. The wool was a specific weave that resisted tearing. The buttons were reinforced with internal backing plates. The collar could be worn up or down, depending on whether you were in the tank or outside in cold weather. Now, even the pockets were positioned based on studies of what tools tank crews needed to carry and where they could reach them while seated inside the tank. And unlike the aristocratic jodhpurs, this uniform remained virtually unchanged from 1934 to 1945. While other German uniforms went through multiple modifications, simplifications, and material substitutions as the war situation deteriorated, the Black Panzer uniform stayed the same. Its practical design couldn't be improved, and its black color meant that even lower quality dyes and recycled materials didn't affect its appearance. The Panzer uniform represents the road not taken by German military fashion. When function dictated design, they created something genuinely excellent. When tradition and symbolism dictated design, they created liabilities. Type 3, mountain troops. The Alpine tradition. The third type of German baggy pants came from an entirely different tradition. The Gebirgsjäger, mountain troops, wore long baggy pants with elastic at the ankles. Unlike the parade ground jodhpurs or the practical Panzer Blacks, these pants came from civilian alpine climbing culture. Try climbing a mountain in tight pants. Try skiing down a slope in restrictive clothing. Try spending weeks at high altitude, where your legs swell from exertion and altitude. You quickly understand why mountain troops needed genuinely baggy pants. The German mountain troops were elite units, drawn from men who grew up in the Alps, who knew mountains intimately, who could ski, climb, and fight at altitudes where other soldiers collapsed from exhaustion. Their uniform reflected this specialized role. Jodh earned the right to wear the Edelweiss flower symbol on their caps. German mountain troops had to complete the Edelweiss March, a brutal mountain march that tested endurance, climbing ability, and mountain craft. Several trainees died every year attempting this qualification. It wasn't ceremonial. It was genuinely dangerous. Only after completing this march could they wear the full mountain uniform, including the distinctive M40 Burgos pants. These pants featured a baggy cut throughout, elastic ankles to prevent them riding up inside boots, and reinforced seats and knees for climbing and sitting on rocky surfaces. These pants are extraordinarily rare today. Collectors consider them one of the rarest pieces of German World War II militaria. Why? Because mountain troops actually used them. They wore them out climbing mountains in Yugoslavia, Greece, Norway, and the Caucasus. They wore them until they fell apart. Most surviving German uniforms are parade uniforms that sat in storage, or field uniforms that saw limited use before being captured. The mountain pants were destroyed through actual mountain warfare. The units that wore them fought in some of the most brutal terrain of the war, and their equipment reflected that use. The Edelweiss symbol itself carries historical irony. It was established in 1907 by Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria-Hungary for mountain units of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Germans inherited it after annexing Austria in 1938 through the Anschluss. So a symbol of Austrian military tradition, representing Austrian independence and Alpine identity, we ended up on German uniforms used to conquer Austria's former territories. The troops wearing the Austrian Edelweiss fought in Yugoslavia, which had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They fought in northern Italy, including territories Austria had claimed for centuries. The symbol of Austrian mountain warfare had been appropriated by the nation that absorbed Austria. The technical design of mountain troop pants revealed how seriously Germans took specialized equipment. The M40 Burgos was based on traditional alpine climbing suits worn by civilian mountaineers since the 1920s. The Germans essentially militarized recreational climbing gear, adding military features to proven civilian designs. The fabric was a tough cotton wool blend that resisted wind and light rain. The elastic ankles were internal, hidden inside the hem, and so they wouldn't catch on rocks or equipment. The reinforced panels at knees and seat used a tighter weave that resisted abrasion. Even the pockets were positioned based on what climbers needed while wearing a backpack or equipment harness. But despite their specialized excellence, mountain troop pants represented a larger German problem: over-specialization. The Wehrmacht had different uniforms for different climates, different terrains, different roles, different seasons. Mountain troops had their uniform. Tropical troops had another. Tank crews another. Paratroopers another. Standard infantry another. And within each category, multiple variations. This required an enormous logistics system to manufacture, distribute, and maintain. It required warehouses full of specialized equipment. It required supply chains that could get the right uniform to the right unit at the right time. When that system worked, German troops were well-equipped specialists. When it broke down under the strain of war, soldiers ended up wearing whatever was available, regardless of whether it was appropriate for their role. Type 4. Fallschirmjäger. The ironic twist. Finally, we arrive at the German paratroopers, the Fallschirmjäger. Their pants were genuinely baggy throughout, with distinctive features designed specifically for jumping out of airplanes and surviving rough landings. These pants included pockets designed to hold gravity knives, the distinctive Fallschirmjäger jumping knife that opened automatically. They had openings built in for internal knee pads, to removable protective pads that paratroopers wore during jumps to protect their knees during landing. The ankles had drawstrings to cinch the pants tight inside jump boots, preventing them from riding up during the parachute descent. And they had a specially sized rear pocket, designed to hold exactly one field dressing bandage. The pants used 6mm PRYM snap buttons for the pockets, allowing quick access to equipment without fumbling with conventional buttons while wearing gloves. Every detail was engineered for the specific needs of airborne operations. German paratroopers were an elite force. The Fallschirmjäger earned their reputation through extraordinarily difficult operations. The assault on Fort Aben and Mael in Belgium in 1940, where they landed gliders directly on top of a supposedly impregnable fortress and captured it in hours. The invasion of Crete in 1941, the largest airborne operation to that point, where they suffered horrific casualties, but ultimately seized the island. When people today think of baggy pants in World War II, they often picture German paratroopers. The distinctive silhouette, the baggy cut, the specialized equipment, all created an image of elite airborne soldiers. But here's where the story takes its ironic twist. Let's return to Anzio, Italy, in February 1944. That German officer, crouching in his foxhole, writing in his diary about devils in baggy pants. He wasn't writing about German paratroopers. He was writing about American paratroopers, specifically the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Airborne Division. The diary entry, discovered after the officer was killed, read in full: American paratroopers, devils in baggy pants, are less than 100 meters from my position. I cannot sleep at night. They appear from nowhere, and we never know when or how they will strike. It seems the black-hearted devils are everywhere. They seem to have the devil's own luck. Twice they have hit my command post. Every man I lost was a veteran. They are the best soldiers I have seen in this war, and I have fought from Poland to North Africa. I hope the baggy pants devils will go somewhere else and give someone else the honor of fighting them. The German officer was noting that American paratrooper pants were baggier than anything in the Wehrmacht. Standard U.S. infantry wore straight-leg wool trousers, but American paratroopers wore M42 jump pants, designed in 1942 specifically for airborne operations. These pants were absurdly baggy by military standards. They ballooned at the thighs like riding breeches, but continued baggy all the way down to the ankles, where they tucked into jump boots. They had cargo pockets on the thighs, more pockets than any standard military trouser. They looked, frankly, ridiculous on the parade ground. But in combat, that bagginess served multiple purposes. The loose fit allowed full range of motion during parachute landings and combat. The multiple pockets carried ammunition, grenades, and equipment. The tough cotton fabric, heavily reinforced, could take incredible abuse. And unlike the precisely tailored German paratrooper pants with their engineered features, American jump pants were simple. Just make them bigger. Just add more pockets. To just reinforce the fabric. When the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment found that diary entry after the officer was killed in combat, they immediately adopted Devils in Baggy Pants as their unofficial nickname. It became their identity. They painted it on signs, used it in unit mottos, embraced it completely. The 504th still exists today in the U.S. Army. They still use the Devils in Baggy Pants nickname. It's painted on buildings at Fort Liberty, their home base. Veterans wear it on unit patches and reunion shirts. The German officer's fear became an American source of pride. So here's the complete irony. Germany spent decades developing baggy pants as symbols of aristocratic authority and specialized combat roles. They engineered them with precision. They imbued them with tradition and meaning. Officer Jodhpurs, Panzer Blacks, some mountain troop pants, paratrooper pants, each with its own history and purpose. America threw together jump pants in 1942 because paratroopers needed something functional. Make them loose, make them tough, make 10,000 of them. The Germans ended up calling the Americans the Baggy Pants Devils. The fashion symbol had been weaponized, and America weaponized it better through sheer pragmatic simplicity. The technical comparison reveals the difference in philosophy. German Fallschirmjäger pants had precisely positioned snap buttons, engineered knee pad openings, specific pocket dimensions based on equipment studies, drawstrings positioned at optimal points based on jump trials. American M42 jump pants had bigger legs, more pockets, tougher fabric. That was it. One approach required precision manufacturing, skilled tailors, specific materials, all complex logistics. The other could be mass-produced by semi-skilled workers using standard materials and simple patterns. By 1943, Germany was discovering what all their elaborate uniform traditions really meant. They meant vulnerability. The war had moved beyond the stage where looking impressive mattered. What mattered now was surviving, fighting effectively, and having enough uniforms to equip millions of soldiers. The aristocratic Jodhpurs required leather for the boots, skilled tailors for the fitted cut, quality fabric for proper draping. Germany was running out of all three. Leather was prioritized for combat boots. Skilled tailors were being conscripted. Quality fabric was increasingly scarce as blockades and bombing disrupted supply chains. The specialized uniforms for mountain troops, paratroopers, and different climates required maintaining separate production lines, separate supply chains, separate inventory systems. The logistics were breaking down. In 1943, Germany introduced the M43 uniform. It was based on the mountain troop pants, but simplified and issued to all troops. Baggy at the thighs, elastic at ankles, designed for low boots and gaiters instead of jack boots. Why the change? They couldn't make enough jack boots anymore. Leather was too scarce. The tall boots that had been part of German military tradition for over a century were too resource-intensive to continue producing in the quantities needed. The M43 pants represented a forced practicality. They weren't designed to look impressive. They were designed to be manufacturable with available resources and wearable with available footwear. By 1944, even the M43 uniform was considered too complex. The M44 uniform was introduced, with even more simplification. The color, officially called Feldgrau 44, was a dull green-brown. It wasn't dull by design. It was dull because they were using whatever dyes were available, often made from recycled materials. The fabric quality was lower. The construction was simpler. The uniform was designed to be produced quickly, with minimal skilled labor. The story of German tropical uniforms reveals how far the decline went. When the Afrika Korps was deployed to North Africa starting in 1941, they received tropical versions of their uniforms, including Jodhpur-style pants made from lighter fabric. The soldiers hated them. The tight fit below the knee was designed for tall boots, but in the desert heat, tall boots were torture. The ballooning thighs trapped heat. The whole design was absurd for the climate. So the soldiers, practical men facing desert warfare, cut them into shorts. Officers issued orders. Stop destroying uniform pants. Soldiers ignored the orders and continued cutting their issue pants into shorts. Eventually, many simply stole British or Commonwealth shorts from prisoners of war. The enemy's simple khaki shorts worked better than German tropical Jodhpurs. Even Rommel, the ultimate Jodhpur loyalist who had worn them throughout his career, eventually gave up. Photographs from late in the North Africa campaign show him wearing a captured British tank jacket and simplified pants. The Desert Fox, symbol of German military excellence, wearing enemy clothing because it worked better. The psychological symbolism of this uniform collapse was profound. Remember the French Revolution? The sans-culottes, the revolutionaries without the aristocratic knee breeches? They represented the working class overthrowing the aristocracy. By 1945, German soldiers were essentially sans-Jodhpurs, fighting in simplified, classless uniforms that bore no resemblance to the elaborate traditional gear they'd started the war wearing. The aristocratic symbol that began this whole story had been erased by industrial total war. The Soviet advance through Eastern Europe and the American and British advance through Western Europe ground up the German uniform system just as surely as it ground up the Wehrmacht itself. Factories were bombed, supply chains were cut, resources vanished. The elaborate logistics needed to maintain different uniforms for different roles, different climates, different branches, all collapsed. By the end, German soldiers wore whatever was available. Paratroopers in infantry pants, tank crews in standard field gray, mountain troops in tropical uniforms. The symbolic language of German military fashion had become meaningless, so why did Germans wear such baggy pants in World War II? The answer isn't one reason. It's 4 different reasons, each revealing something about German military culture. First, officer Jodhpurs, aristocratic tradition from Indian riding pants named after a geographic misunderstanding in 1897. Worn not because they were practical, but because they signaled class, tradition, and authority. The same reason Hollywood directors wore them to show power over their film crews. Second, black panzer pants, a genuinely practical solution to the problem of oil stains and cramped tank interiors. Based on 200-year-old cavalry death's head traditions, but designed with real function in mind. So practical that even the British tried to copy them. Third, mountain troop pants. Actual functional climbing gear, militarized from civilian alpine tradition. Specialized equipment for specialized troops, representing German thoroughness and the Austrian heritage they'd absorbed. Fourth, paratrooper pants. Combat necessity designed for jumping from airplanes and fighting after rough landings. Engineered with typical German precision, but ultimately less baggy than the American jump pants that earned the nickname Devils in baggy pants. But here's the real answer. The deeper truth beneath all the technical details and historical anecdotes. Germany's baggy pants represented everything about their military culture. They were obsessed with tradition. with symbolism, with class distinction. Every uniform told you exactly where someone fit in the hierarchy. Officer or enlisted, cavalry tradition or infantry, elite paratrooper or standard soldier, mountain specialist or tank crew. This obsession with symbolic meaning and traditional forms created a military that looked impressive on parade, but struggled with the practical demands of industrial total war. America's approach was fundamentally different. Make it work, make it simple, make it cheap, make 10,000 of them. American paratroopers got baggy pants not because of tradition or symbolism, but because someone decided loose pants worked better for jumping. That was the entire design philosophy. Does it work? Good. Make more. The German officer at Anzio was terrified of devils in baggy pants because American military fashion symbolized something Germany couldn't replicate or counter. Industrial pragmatism over aristocratic theater, function over form, quantity and simplicity over quality and complexity. When that officer wrote about black-hearted devils appearing from nowhere, about never sleeping, about losing veteran soldiers to these American paratroopers, he was describing more than just combat effectiveness. He was describing the psychological impact of facing an enemy that didn't care about military traditions or aristocratic symbols. An enemy that just made simple, functional equipment in overwhelming quantities and used it effectively. Consider the ultimate irony of this entire story. Today, when you see a movie villain in jodhpur pants and jackboots, you're seeing a fashion choice that started with an Indian prince who didn't understand English. It was adopted by European aristocrats who wanted to look like cavalry officers. It was inherited by German officers who never rode horses, and it ended up making them perfect targets for snipers. The pants weren't baggy because they worked better. They were baggy because they looked impressive, because they maintained tradition, because they signaled authority and class, until impressive became a liability, until tradition became an anchor, until the symbols of authority became bullseyes. The mountain troops discovered their specialized gear couldn't be produced in sufficient quantities. The panzer crews found their practical uniforms couldn't prevent factory bombings from disrupting production. The paratroopers learned that precision engineering meant nothing when you couldn't manufacture enough parachutes to deploy them. And the officers found that their aristocratic jodhpurs marked them for death. By war's end, German uniform production had collapsed into whatever could be manufactured with available materials. The symbolic language of pants had been reduced to a single message: we're running out of everything. Meanwhile, American factories were producing millions of simple, functional uniforms. American soldiers arrived in Europe better equipped than German soldiers could hope to be. Not because American equipment was more sophisticated or traditional, because it was simpler, cheaper, and producible in vast quantities. And those American devils in baggy pants? The 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment still exists. It still uses that nickname, still proud of it. They maintain a memorial to that German officer's diary entry at their unit headquarters. The fear he expressed, the devils he described, became a badge of honor that outlasted the Wehrmacht by 80 years. The German officer who wrote that diary entry, his name is lost to history. We don't know who he was. We only know his fear, preserved in his final written words before he was killed at Anzio. But his description of baggy pants devils became legendary. It became an American military tradition. It became proof that sometimes the simplest solution, the most pragmatic approach, defeats the most elaborate traditions. The story of German baggy pants in World War II is ultimately a story about what happens when symbolism conflicts with practicality, when tradition conflicts with industrial reality, when looking impressive conflicts with being effective. Germany chose impressive. They chose tradition. They chose symbolism. And they lost to an enemy wearing baggier pants than they ever did, who didn't care about tradition or symbolism, who just wanted pants that worked. Some defeats are written in grand strategy and decisive battles. Others are written in the mundane details of uniform design, in the difference between pants tailored to signal aristocratic authority, and pants made baggy enough to fight in. The Germans wore baggy pants to maintain tradition and signal class. The Americans wore baggier pants because they worked. History records which approach 1.